Greetings. We are along the historic Ogeechee Canal, the Ogeechee Canal right here and back of me. And I have to say, I love my culture, my history. I love being African. I love the diaspora, the diaspora is in Creole. I love that. I love how God has blessed us to be able to weather a storm and still come through that storm. Now, we still got some rain showers and other stuff like that, thunderstorms, but we have gone through the hurricanes, the tornadoes, the monsoons, the typhoons. We've gone through all that, and African people are still right here in the Americas, still right here. Other people have been wiped out, but African people is a blessing, and that's why I love this right here, and I've loved this since I was a child. So I guess that's why I have a different perspective about some things. And, you know, the Ogeechee Canal is located in historic Yamacraw. Historic Yamacraw. Yamacraw actually began here on River Street. This is River Street right here. And also to the port down that side. But yes, historic Yamacraw began from River Street and went to Turner Boulevard. Basically from MLK Jr. Boulevard or West Broad Street over to the viaduct. So many of us today, in our memory, Yamacraw is only tied to the projects, to a public housing development. That's not historic Yamacraw. Historic Yamacraw, again, went from the river to the visitor center, pretty much. And I had some friends with me on one of my journeys, and what occurred when I brought them through here, that's when one of them said, and he had his kids with him, said, wait a minute, my mama said that she grew up in Yamacraw, but we thought she grew up in the projects. I said, no, she grew up over here. This is where she grew up at. This is the side that she grew up on. And many people who live right here in Savannah, Georgia, don't even realize that historic Yamacraw is right here. In 1940s, that's when they went and wiped out the middle part of Yamacraw. That's the Bay Street to Oglethorpe Avenue side. But then what happened, Bay Street and then Oglethorpe Avenue later on was transformed also, taken away from folks who had businesses over here, had homes over here, and transformed into this commercial developments that we see that now became car dealerships, now hotels, and that we see now part of the port, and now also now becoming the other phase of tourism in Savannah, the western side of it. Yeah, there are things called gentrification. People think residential gentrification. There's also commercial gentrification. And that's what happened. And they started right here in this area in the 1940s, 1950s. And so again, I can throw it out there to tell people this. You can lose your history, lose your culture, aspects of your culture, in just in a couple of years, in decades for that matter. And in Savannah, what happened in Savannah, as I shared, folks, that we lost a part of our African culture here in an 80-year gap. There's an 80-year gap that disconnected us from things that were tied to Africa. Because just like this same creek, this canal right here, African people, Gullah Geechee people used to get baptized right here in the Ogeechee Canal. And there are photographs of people being baptized in the canal. Also got baptized in the Savannah River. That was a part of African tradition because we do that in Africa and do it over here, kept it alive right over here. So African people were doing this. Gullah Geechee people were doing that. But guess what? We thought that we became sophisticated, educated, and all of that, and we began to turn our backs on Africa and traditions that were tied to us. In fact, I had a lady in her 80s talk about, she remembered living and growing up in Savannah in this part of Yamacraw in a house that's right beyond the pillars over there. She was born, she said, by a midwife right here in Yamacraw. And she said, Jamal, we came from homes where we were bilingual. Our homes were bilingual. She said we spoke Gullah at home and also spoke English. So now, you heard what I just said? In Savannah, African people here were bilingual. See, today, when you think you're so educated, some of us can barely speak English or write English. But guess what? In Yamacraw, like across all of Savannah, people were bilingual. But then that's not all. In Savannah, African people also spoke other languages too, right here in the early 1900s. But what happened is in the 1900s that we now have a gap because we were not letting other people educate our children or give us standards as to what it meant to be American. To be American doesn't mean that you give up your culture and your history. It means that you bring it all to the same table of humanity together, as I often say. But then what happened here, we turned our backs and let other people begin teaching our children. And so then what happened, they turned their backs on the Gullah Geechee culture, African culture that was right here. People saw African men who were beekeepers right here. People who were along the canals here in Savannah will plant imbolta trees, sacred trees for the remembrance of family members that had passed away. Right here in Savannah, Georgia, they did that. That same thing is done in Africa. See, we kept it alive right over here. People remember seeking in the wilderness right here. But in Savannah, Georgia, and now I say at least Savannah, I can't say other places, in Savannah, there was an 80-year gap that made us disconnect from Africa. Imagine if we had maintained those foundations right there. People praying. Again, I have to throw this out there. People were praying to the east, praying in the morning, during the noontime, and during the evening times. And that gives you an idea about what was resonating in those people spiritually. So when some of us go and act like we've always been this right here, no, you have not. You don't know your story. As I often say, you don't know your story. And sometimes your mama don't know the story because she wasn't told the story. And your grandmama wasn't told the story either. So when they were part of that generation of the gap, they won't know. But there are a few people who are honest enough to go and tell it, who have no shame in telling the story. And that's the wonderful thing. And we get that. For example, yesterday I had a wonderful time with my brother, my two brothers, Chef Quasi, again, Roosevelt Brownlee, some of y'all know him, but Quasi, we know him. Quasi, great chef from Defusky, Savannah. Then I had my homie, my great chef brother, who's a culinary historian from out of Charleston side, that's brother BJ Dennis, right here. And so we got into this conversation. We're talking about, again, food ways, because some of y'all know I tell folks, one of the better ways that you see history is by food, that what you eat. When you know what you eat and the origins of it, you see how Africa remained with us, how we didn't turn our backs on it with regard to our cultural traditions regarding the culinary. That is the arts of the making food, cooking food and all that, and producing food. And so BJ and I got into this thing, because I talk about this, I share this thing, I talk about how my mother them on Hilton Head were corn mullet, or corning mullet, C-O-R-N-I-N-G. Corning mullet. What happened? They said sometime when there's going to be a freeze or a frost, they will then go and get the mullet, which is a fish. For some of y'all who don't know that, get the mullet. Then they'll go clean it, put the salt on it, put it out there in the frost. We would salt fish. That's what Gullah Geechee people did. At least I'm going to say Gullah Geechee people. Now, other black folks, I would try to throw this out. The other black folks throughout the United States, but then I don't want some of y'all trying to argue with me about this, but at least I can go say Gullah Geechee people. This is what we did. We corn mullet. They had herring and other things like that. They would corn the fish. They would salt the fish or smoke the fish. Now, why is this tied to the conversation with BJ and I and Quasi, what we were having yesterday? Because BJ, being a culinary historian, understood some of the elements of what we did, because Quasi had fixed some greens and did not have any meat in it. It had, and BJ said, "You got some smoked herring in this right here," before he even tasted it. Even he just looked at it and observed it, and that's when Quasi said, "Yeah." And that's when BJ said, "Guess what? Putting pork and seasoning our meats with our vegetables with pork, that only happened after black folks had not got their freedom." So I'll just pause. I want you to understand, when people go and say, "We've been eating pork all our lives," and such and such and so, we always put that in our meats and all that. No, it's not. That was a gap that happened that made you talk like that, because they didn't know any better. Your mamas, your daddies, and your grandmamas, your granddaddies, your great-grand, they didn't know no better, because people didn't tell them right, because, or at least they knew about it, but they didn't think it was important and relevant to go and share with you. No, you did not. African people, Gullah Geechee people, we use fish, we use seafood, shrimp heads, and other stuff like that actually goes back to Africa. When BJ brought it up, I was like, oh my God, yes, brother, this is what we talk about, this is what it's about. So here you go, BJ, understand that that's the same thing we do in Africa. We season our food with seafood, our vegetables with the seafood. From salted to smoked to mortar and pestle, crushed, and then we put it inside our vegetables. So when you talk about the pork and other stuff like that, that's not correct. When you say that's what always has been done. Of course we had pork and other stuff like that, but then guess what? That's not like how some of y'all make it seem like it was a proliferation of it. No, See how something simple is that the waterways represented a way for us to even season our food. But guess what? You wouldn't know that in Savannah or other Gullah Geechee people if they don't talk about it. As I said, there was an 80-year gap that causes now to disconnect from the type of stuff like that. Simple things, and sometimes we spit out this incorrect mythology about who we are in our culture and our history. That's why we think about Yamacraw. Yamacraw was not the projects. It was a black community that was popular throughout this entire country. A lot of us don't know that. So the projects, that's something that's recent. As I said, that's your spatial memory right now. Go back in time and understand that right here in this community right here, people were bilingual. So Gullah, if you don't realize that, it's not Savannah talk or Savannah speak or Charleston talk. In fact, understand that Gullah is an African language. And those who are talking about it right now, go back and say, no, this is not Savannah talk. This is Africa. I want you to understand, because see, when you understand Africa is still here with you, you can stick your head up. Hold your head up, stick your chest out, and have a sense of pride. Understand that, no, you didn't lose Africa. And that 80-year gap is the one that caused us to have the problems right here. There's a whole bunch of stuff we can talk about, but I just want to throw that out there and say, hey, listen, the waterways were important to us. Communities were important to us. Food was important to us. And when we talk about it, let's talk about it correctly, and let's give people the right understanding of what was going on. But right here, as I said, yo, check this out, baptizing right here, and their images showing black folks in Savannah, Gullah Geechee people being baptized right in the water. That tradition goes back to Africa, and there's a lot to that. I'm not going to get into it right now. You got to later on check that out in another video or in the book that we're putting out there. But then also, foodways. The food, no, it was not always about us eating pork or something like to throw that out there. My mama ate that, my daddy ate that, but guess what? Your great-great-great-grandmama and great-great-great-granddaddy didn't eat that like that. They understood get the stuff and corn mullet and all the other stuff like that. Get the shrimp head, get all of that right there and season your food. That's what makes us genius, because we still hold on to Africa. Just as I said, that 80-year gap changed the dynamics for us. And right now, in 2019, it's changing for us also. All this right here is not changing for us right now. And so we tell folks, it's time for us to tell our story correctly. Peace and